The blood pooled beneath the transport craft as Queen Alara stepped onto the landing platform. Emergency lights cast harsh shadows across twisted metal and scattered debris. Her royal guard maintained formation, weapons drawn, scanning the wreckage for survivors. "Majesty, we should wait for the hazmat team," Captain Torres whispered, his voice tight with concern. Alara ignored him. Steam hissed from ruptured coolant lines as she approached the craft's torn hull. The vessel bore no human markings. Its design was angular, organic, unlike anything in their databases. Through the gaping hole in the side, she glimpsed movement. "There," she pointed. A figure hunched over something small in the shadows. Human, male, his uniform torn and bloody. He cradled what appeared to be a child wrapped in torn fabric. The Queen's breath caught as she realized the truth. The child wasn't human. The creature's skin glowed pale blue in the emergency lighting, covered in fine scales that shifted like liquid mercury. Forearms, impossibly thin, clutched at the human's shirt. Its face was elongated, almost reptilian, with dark eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. "Step away from the alien," Torres commanded, raising his weapon. The man looked up, his face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. "She's just a child," he said quietly. "She's hurt." Queen Alara studied the scene carefully. The alien child trembled against the human's chest, making soft clicking sounds that might have been distress or fear. Blood seeped from wounds along her scaled arms where metal had torn through her skin during the crash. "Identify yourself," the Queen ordered. "Dr. Marcus Chen, Xenobiological Research Division. I was transporting Subject 12 back to the laboratory when our engines failed." His voice cracked. "Her parents, they didn't make it." The alien child lifted her head at the mention of her parents, those dark eyes finding the Queen's face. Intelligence flickered there, not the blank stare of an animal, but something deeper, something that recognized loss. "The research protocols are clear," Torres said. "All alien specimens must be contained in sterile environments." "She's not a specimen," Chen said firmly. "She has a name. Kira." At the sound, the child made a softer clicking sound, almost like a purr. Her forearms wrapped tighter around Chen's neck, and she pressed her face against his shoulder. The simple gesture of comfort sent a chill through the Queen's spine. "The contamination risk," Torres began, "is minimal," Chen interrupted. "I've been exposed for 18 hours. If there was a biological threat, I'd already be dead." He looked down at the child. "She's been through enough." Queen Alara stepped closer, ignoring her guard's sharp intake of breath. The alien child watched her approach with curious eyes, tilting her head in a distinctly non-human gesture. Up close, the Queen could see the delicate bone structure beneath the scales, the way her breathing created tiny patterns of light across her skin. "Your research mission was classified," the Queen said. "What were you studying?" Chen hesitated. "Cognitive development, problem-solving abilities. We thought they might be presentient." "Thought? We were wrong." Chen's voice barely above a whisper. "She understands everything. Yesterday she drew pictures of her home planet. Today she tried to comfort me when I cried for her parents." The alien child, Kira, reached one small hand toward the Queen. Her fingers were longer than human ones, ending in tiny claws, but the gesture was unmistakably peaceful. The Queen found herself extending her own hand in response. Kira's touch was cool and surprisingly gentle. She traced the lines of the Queen's palm with one claw, making soft musical sounds that seemed almost like questions. Then she pressed the Queen's hand to her own chest, where a rapid heartbeat thrummed beneath the scales. "She's trying to show you she's alive," Chen said quietly. "Really alive. Not just biological functions, but aware." Torres shifted nervously. "Majesty, the media will arrive soon. If they see you making contact with an uncontained alien, then they'll see their Queen protecting a child," Alara said firmly. She knelt beside Chen, bringing herself to Kira's eye level. "Can she understand us?" "Some. She's learned basic concepts. Safety, danger, friend, family." Chen's voice broke on the last word. "She knows her parents are gone." Kira turned from the Queen back to Chen, pressing her face against his neck again. Her breathing had slowed, and the light patterns on her skin were fading to deeper blues and purples. Exhaustion was winning over fear. "She trusts you," the Queen observed. "I don't know why." "I was part of the team that took her from her world." Chen looked up at the Queen with haunted eyes. "She should hate me. But she doesn't." Queen Elora watched as Kira's eyes began to flutter closed, her small body relaxing completely against Chen's chest. "She chooses to trust despite everything." The sound of approaching vehicles echoed across the platform. Military transports, medical teams, probably several government officials who would want immediate answers. The Queen knew that in minutes, this moment would be gone. Decisions would be made. Protocols would be followed. Kira's breathing deepened as sleep took hold. Her forearms remained wrapped around Chen, but loosely now, as if she finally felt safe enough to let go. In the harsh emergency lighting, she looked impossibly small and vulnerable. "What happens to her now?" Chen asked. Queen Alara stood slowly, her mind racing through possibilities and consequences. The next choice would define not just Kira's fate, but potentially the future of human-alien relations. The Queen's personal communicator chirped, her advisors demanding immediate updates, her security team requesting orders, the media clamoring for statements. She silenced it all with a single gesture. Around them, the rescue teams maintained their distance, waiting for her command. Dr. Hurd? Chen adjusted his grip on the sleeping alien child, trying to make her more comfortable. Kira's bioluminescent patterns had settled into a gentle rhythm, synchronized with her breathing. It was the first time since the crash that she'd seemed truly at peace. "The standard protocol requires immediate quarantine," Captain Torres said quietly. His weapon now lowered but still ready. "Biological analysis, cognitive testing, psychological evaluation. The Senate will demand a full report within 48 hours. "The Senate wasn't here," Queen Elara replied, watching Kira's peaceful face. "They didn't see what I saw. Majesty with respect. Public safety begins with understanding what we're protecting ourselves from." She turned to Chen. "In your professional opinion, does this child pose a threat?" Chen looked down at Kira, whose small hand had somehow found its way to his shirt pocket where he kept his emergency rations. Even in sleep, she seemed to know where comfort could be found. "She's the gentlest being I've ever encountered. Her species evolved as caretakers. They nurture other creatures on their world. The greatest threat she poses is making us question everything we thought we knew about alien intelligence." A convoy of black vehicles pulled up to the platform's edge. Defense Minister Walsh emerged from the first transport, his face grim as he took in the scene. Behind him came Dr. Sarah Rodriguez, head of the Xenobiology Department, followed by a full medical team in hazmat suits. "Your Majesty," Walsh called out, maintaining distance. "We need to establish a secure perimeter and begin decontamination procedures immediately." Queen Alara held up one hand, stopping their approach. "Dr. Rodriguez, how long have you been studying this species?" 6 months, Majesty. "Since first contact with their scout ship?" "And what have you learned about their social structures?" Rodriguez hesitated, glancing between Walsh and the Queen. "They're complex. Family units are central to their culture. They appear to form deep emotional bonds, particularly between parents and offspring. The separation trauma has been significant." "Trauma," the Queen repeated. She looked at Kira, still sleeping peacefully against Chen's chest. "This child has been separated from everything she knew, studied like a laboratory animal, and now orphaned. Yet she chooses to trust Dr. Chen. Why?" "I believe," Chen said carefully, "it's because I was the first to treat her as a person rather than a subject. I spoke to her, showed her pictures, tried to explain what was happening. She responded to kindness." Defense Minister Walsh stepped forward, his patience clearly wearing thin. "Majesty, the potential for viral contamination alone requires immediate action. We have protocols for a reason." "Protocols written before we knew we were dealing with sentient beings," the Queen countered. "Dr. Chen has been exposed for 18 hours. Has he shown any signs of infection?" "That's not the point." "That's exactly the point." Queen Alara moved closer to Chen and his small charge. We've been operating under the assumption that first contact would be with equals, adults, diplomats, military forces. Instead, we found a scared child whose only crime was being born to the wrong species. Kira stirred slightly, perhaps sensing the tension in the voices around her. She made a soft questioning sound, barely audible, and pressed closer to Chen. He automatically adjusted his arms to support her better, a gesture so natural it spoke of hours spent caring for her. She's not just surviving, the Queen observed. She's adapting, learning to trust in impossible circumstances, which makes her potentially more dangerous, Walsh argued. Adaptive intelligence in an unknown species makes her more valuable as an ally than a prisoner. The Queen's voice carried royal authority now, cutting through the debate. We have an opportunity here to establish trust rather than fear as the foundation of our relationship with her people. Dr. Rodriguez pulled up data on her tablet, her expression troubled. Majesty, our initial contact attempts with the adult specimens were unsuccessful. They became increasingly withdrawn, refused food, showed signs of severe psychological distress. 2 didn't survive captivity. The implications hung heavy in the air. Queen Alara felt something cold settle in her stomach as she looked at Kira's peaceful face. You're telling me we've already killed members of her family through our protocols? We were following established xenobiological research standards based on animal testing models. Chen's voice was bitter. We treated them like lab rats instead of people. No wonder they withdrew. They were grieving. Kira's eyes opened slowly, those dark mirrors reflecting the emergency lights. She looked around at the gathered humans with careful attention, then up at Chen's face. Some silent communication passed between them, a reassurance perhaps, or a warning to stay calm. She understands more than we think, the Queen said quietly. She knows we're deciding her fate. As if responding to her words, Kira slowly extended one small hand toward the Queen again. This time, her gesture included all the gathered humans, not quite reaching, but clearly offering something. Perhaps trust, perhaps simply acknowledgement of their shared presence. Your Majesty, Captain Torres said quietly, whatever decision you make here will echo through history. First contact protocol, alien rights, public safety, everything changes based on what happens in the next few minutes. The weight of his words settled on Queen Alara's shoulders. She looked at the assembled team, at the sleeping alien child, at Dr. Chen's exhausted but determined face. Then she made her choice. Dr. Rodriguez, I want you to begin preparation for a new research protocol, one based on cooperation rather than containment. Dr. Chen will lead the team. Walsh stepped forward. Majesty, I strongly advise against. Your objection is noted and overruled. Her voice carried absolute authority. This child will not be treated as a prisoner or a test subject. She will be treated as what she is, a refugee who has lost everything and deserves our protection. Kira made a soft sound that might have been approval or simply comfort. She settled deeper into Chen's arms, her trust complete and devastating in its innocence. Around them, the political and scientific machinery of government began to shift, adapting to a new reality, where first contact wasn't about conquest or fear, but about a sleeping child who had chosen to believe in human kindness despite every reason not to. The Queen knew this moment would define not just her reign, but humanity's future among the stars. As she watched Kira sleep, surrounded by those who would protect rather than exploit her, she felt the weight of that future settling into something resembling hope. Queen Alara's decision rippled outward like shockwaves through the assembled officials. Defense Minister Walsh's face darkened with barely contained frustration, while Dr. Rodriguez frantically made notes on her tablet, already recalculating protocols and resource allocations. Majesty, the Senate will demand explanations, Walsh said through gritted teeth. The military has invested significantly in defensive preparations based on the assumption that these aliens pose a threat. Then we'll need to present them with new evidence, the Queen replied calmly. She gestured to Chen and the sleeping Kira. Dr. Chen, I want detailed reports on every interaction you've had with her. Behavioral observations, communication attempts, emotional responses, everything. Chen nodded, exhaustion evident in his movements. She's been trying to communicate since the first day, drawing pictures, attempting to mimic human speech patterns. Yesterday she showed me a game her people play, something like chess, but with emotional logic trees instead of pure strategy. She's been teaching me. Teaching you? Dr. Rodriguez looked up from her tablet, intrigued despite the circumstances. Her species thinks in emotional networks. They solve problems by considering how each action affects the feelings of others. It's not just intelligence, it's empathy as a survival mechanism. Chen looked down at Kira, whose breathing had deepened into true sleep. She's been trying to help me understand her world, which makes her a potential intelligence asset, Walsh said immediately. Cultural information, technological capabilities, military weaknesses. She's a child, the Queen's voice cut like ice. Not a spy, not a weapon. A child who has already suffered more loss than most adults could handle. Captain Torres stepped forward carefully. Majesty, what are your orders regarding housing and security? The current containment facility wasn't designed for long-term care of a sentient being. Queen Alara had been considering this since the moment Kira had first touched her hand. The trust in that gesture haunted her, complete faith despite every reason for fear. We'll establish new quarters, somewhere she can feel safe while she heals. The royal wing has suitable space, Torres suggested quietly. Private, secure, but not institutional. Walsh's expression shifted to alarm. You cannot seriously be considering housing an alien in the palace. I'm considering housing a traumatized child where she can receive proper care. The Queen's tone brooked no argument. Dr. Chen, would you be willing to oversee her transition? Chen looked down at Kira, whose small hand had somehow found his during their conversation. Her scales shimmer faintly even in sleep, patterns shifting like aurora across her skin, as long as her well-being comes first. No more tests without her consent. No more treating her like a specimen. Agreed. Queen Alara turned to Dr. Rodriguez. I want you to redesign your entire research approach. Voluntary interaction, cultural exchange, learning rather than studying. Can you do that? Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment, clearly recalculating years of methodology. It would be revolutionary, unprecedented. We'd be creating an entirely new field of interspecies cooperation studies. Good. Revolution is sometimes necessary. A soft sound made them all turn. Kira was stirring, her dark eyes opening slowly. She looked around at the circle of faces with careful attention, then up at Chen with something that might have been a question in her expression. It's okay, Chen murmured to her. These people want to help. Kira studied each face methodically, her gaze lingering longest on the Queen. Then, to everyone's surprise, she struggled to sit up in Chen's arms and extended all four hands in a gesture that was unmistakably formal, some kind of greeting or acknowledgement. She's trying to be diplomatic, Chen realized. She knows this is important. Queen Alara stepped closer and carefully extended her own hands in response. Kira's cool fingers touched hers briefly, then the child made a series of soft musical sounds that rose and fell like questions. She's asking if she's safe, Chen translated, wonder in his voice. She's learned enough human body language to read the tension here. She wants to know if she needs to be afraid. The Queen looked directly into those dark mirror eyes. Tell her she's safe. Tell her she's welcome here. Chen spoke to Kira in a mixture of human words and her own musical language, a pidgin they'd developed together. The child's expression brightened, and she made a sound that was unmistakably relief. Then she did something that made every human present catch their breath. She smiled. It wasn't quite a human expression. Her facial structure was different, the movement of muscles unfamiliar, but the emotion behind it was universal. Gratitude. Hope, perhaps even happiness. She reached one small hand toward the Queen again, this time touching her face with gentle curiosity. She's thanking you, Chen said softly. In her culture, touching another being's face it's sacred. reserved for family. The political implications hit every official presence simultaneously. An alien child had just claimed kinship with their queen. In front of witnesses, the ramifications would echo through every diplomatic and military channel in human space. But Queen Elara felt only the cruel touch of trust against her cheek and made her final decision. "Then we are family," she said clearly, her words carrying across the platform for everyone to hear. "And family protects each other." Defense Minister Walsh stepped back, his face pale. "Majesty, you've just made a formal declaration of adoption under royal protocol. The legal implications alone are exactly what I intended." She looked around at her assembled advisors. "We can choose fear, or we can choose hope. We can build walls, or we can build bridges. I choose to believe that a child who can trust despite betrayal, who can show kindness after suffering, represents something better than our worst assumptions." Kira leaned against Chen's shoulder again, but her eyes remained on the queen. She made a soft sound that might have been her attempt at a human word, something close to mother, or safe, or perhaps simply yes. The emergency vehicles still waited at the platform's edge, their crews watching this unprecedented moment unfold. Tomorrow there would be meetings, protocols to rewrite, explanations to give. Tonight there was simply a tired child who had finally found people willing to see her as more than an alien threat. Queen Elara stood, her decision made and unshakable. "Dr. Chen, let's take our daughter home." As they moved toward the royal transport, Kira's bioluminescent patterns pulsed in gentle waves across her skin. No longer the frantic flickers of fear, but something deeper, something that looked remarkably like contentment. In her arms, held close and protected, she had found what every orphaned child searches for, a family willing to fight for her place in the world. The royal transport glided silently through the capital's empty streets as dawn approached. Queen Elara sat across from Dr. Chen, watching Kira sleep in his arms. The child had barely stirred during the transfer, her trust so complete that even movement couldn't wake her. "How long before the media discovers what happened?" Chen asked quietly. "Hours, maybe less." The Queen's voice carried weariness now that they were away from official scrutiny. "My press secretary is probably already fielding calls. By morning, every news outlet in human space will want statements." Chen adjusted his hold on Kira, careful not to disturb her rest. "What will you tell them? The truth, that we found a child in need and chose compassion over protocol." She studied Kira's peaceful face, noted how the stress lines around her eyes had finally relaxed. "Though I suspect truth will be the least popular version of events." The transport turned through the palace gates, past guards who had been hastily briefed on their unusual passenger. Queen Elara had spent the journey making calls, clearing security protocols, ensuring that Kira's arrival would be as smooth as possible. The last thing the child needed was more chaos. "The quarters are ready," Captain Torres reported through the comms system. "Medical suite adjacent, food service briefed on dietary requirements. Dr. Rodriguez sent preliminary care guidelines ahead." "Good. What about the Senate?" "Emergency session called for tomorrow afternoon. Senator Morrison is already demanding investigations into your decision-making process." Queen Elara wasn't surprised. Morrison had built his career on anti-alien sentiment, using fear of the unknown to gain political support. Kira's very existence would challenge everything he'd claimed about alien threats. "Let him investigate," she said calmly. "He'll find a queen who chose to protect a child." The transport stopped at the palace's private entrance, away from the main areas where staff might gather. Queen Elara had learned long ago that sometimes leadership meant shielding others from difficult decisions until they were ready to understand them. Chen carried Kira through corridors lined with centuries of royal portraits. The child stirred once, looking around with curiosity before settling back against his shoulder. Her adaptability continued to amaze the queen, thrust into an alien world, yet finding ways to trust and survive. The prepared quarters were elegant but comfortable. Soft furniture and warm colors, large windows overlooking private gardens, a sleeping area that could be adjusted for Kira's physiological needs. Dr. Rodriguez had worked with the palace staff to create a space that felt safe rather than clinical. "She should probably eat when she wakes," Chen said, settling into a chair near the window. Kira remained curled against him, her breathing steady and peaceful. Her people need frequent small meals, especially young ones, and she likes to see the sky while she eats. It calms her. Queen Alara made mental notes, already planning how to adapt palace routines around a child's needs. What else should I know? She's curious about everything. Books, especially picture books, music. She responds strongly to melody and rhythm, and she needs to know where you are. Chen looked up with tired eyes. She's formed attachment bonds that are probably inappropriate by human psychological standards, but essential for her species' development. Meaning she'll consider you part of her family unit now, permanently. If something happened to you, the trauma could be devastating. Chen's voice carried both warning and wonder. She doesn't love conditionally. Once you're part of her pack, you're part of it forever. The weight of that responsibility settled on the Queen's shoulders. She had committed not just to protecting Kira, but to being present in her life indefinitely. Royal duties had never included parenting alien children, yet here she was. "How long do her people live?" she asked. "We think centuries. She's probably equivalent to a human 6-year-old, but she'll mature slowly by our standards." Chen looked down at Kira's sleeping face. She could outlive us all. Queen Alara felt something profound shift in her understanding of what she'd committed to. This wasn't a temporary arrangement or political gesture. Kira would be part of her life, part of the royal family for decades to come. Future monarchs would inherit not just a crown, but an alien sister. A soft chime announced Dr. Rodriguez's arrival. She entered quietly, carrying medical supplies and what appeared to be several bags of specialized food supplements. "How is she?" Rodriguez asked, keeping her voice low. "Sleeping peacefully for the first time since the crash," Chen replied. "The change in environment helped. She feels safer here." Rodriguez set up a discreet monitoring station in the corner, then approached carefully. Kira's bioluminescent patterns were barely visible under her scaled skin, pulsing in slow, even rhythms that suggested deep rest. "Her vital signs are stronger," Rodriguez noted with relief. "The stress responses we recorded earlier have almost completely normalized. Whatever you're doing, it's working." Queen Alara moved to the window, looking out at gardens where morning light was beginning to filter through ancient trees. "Dr. Rodriguez, what do we know about her people's current situation? Is there hope of reuniting her with surviving members of her species?" The doctor's expression grew troubled. "The diplomatic situation is complex. Our first contact team made significant mistakes. The adult aliens we encountered became increasingly hostile after what they perceived as aggressive research protocols. Communication broke down completely after the deaths in custody. Deaths that could have been prevented," Chen said bitterly. "If we'd understood their psychological needs from the beginning, which makes Kira even more valuable as a bridge between our species," Rodriguez continued. "She's adapted to human contact in ways her elders couldn't. She might be our only hope for eventual reconciliation." The irony wasn't lost on Queen Alara. A child orphaned by human mistakes might be the key to healing the damage those mistakes had caused. But first, Kira needed time to heal herself. Kira stirred as sunlight touched her face, her eyes opening slowly. She looked around the new room with careful attention, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. When her gaze found Queen Alara by the window, she made a soft questioning sound. "Good morning," the Queen said gently, approaching the chair where Chen held her. Kira sat up carefully, her small hands reaching toward the window where golden light streamed through glass. She made a sound that was almost musical, filled with what might have been wonder or joy. "She's saying the light is beautiful," Chen translated. "Her people have a deep connection to natural illumination. Artificial lights cause them stress over time." "Then we'll make sure she has plenty of natural light," Queen Alara decided, immediately. "Whatever she needs." Kira looked between the Queen and Chen, then made a series of sounds that rose and fell like questions. Chen responded in their shared pidgin language, and the child's expression brightened considerably. "I told her this is her new home," Chen explained, "that she's safe here and that you want to take care of her." Kira extended all 4 hands toward the Queen in that formal gesture again. This time, when Queen Alara reached back, the child grasped her fingers firmly and made a sound that was unmistakably a name, or perhaps a title. She's calling you something like First Mother, Chen said with wonder in his voice. It's a position of incredible honor in her culture. She's formally recognizing you as the leader of her new family unit. Queen Alara felt tears threaten as those dark mirror eyes looked up at her with complete trust. In accepting this title, Kira had given her something more precious than any crown, the absolute faith of an innocent who had chosen love despite every reason for fear. Tell her, the queen said quietly, that I accept. The final confrontation came sooner than expected. Queen Alara was reading to Kira in the garden when Captain Torres approached with grim efficiency, his presence announcing trouble before he spoke. Majesty, Senator Morrison is here with the Defense Committee and a court order demanding immediate access to the alien subject. Kira looked up from the picture book they'd been sharing, her dark eyes reading the tension that suddenly filled the air. She moved closer to Queen Alara on the garden bench, all four hands finding purchase on the queen's arm. The order specifies immediate transfer to military custody pending full parliamentary review, Torres continued quietly. I'm sorry, Majesty, but they have legal authority. Through the garden's archway, Queen Alara could see the approaching delegation. Senator Morrison led them, his expression stern and righteous. Behind him marched Admiral Chen, Dr. Catherine Webb from the military xenobiology division, and a file of security personnel who looked embarrassed to be there. Kira made a soft sound of distress, pressing closer to the queen. Chen had taught her enough human body language to recognize when adults were angry, and the approaching group radiated hostility. It's all right, Queen Alara murmured to the child, though her own heart was racing. No one is going to hurt you. But even as she said it, she wondered if that promise could be kept. Morrison stopped just outside comfortable conversation distance, establishing dominance through space and formality. Your Majesty, by order of the Senate Emergency Committee, we're here to take custody of the alien specimen for proper evaluation and containment. Her name is Kira, the Queen replied calmly, and she is under royal protection. Royal protection doesn't supersede parliamentary authority in matters of planetary security. Morrison's voice carried the weight of political certainty. This creature represents an unknown threat that requires immediate scientific evaluation. Kira shrank back at the word creature, her bioluminescent patterns beginning to flicker with the rapid pulses that indicated fear. Queen Alara felt those small hands tighten on her arm like anchors in a storm. Dr. Webb, the Queen addressed the military scientists directly. What specific threat do you believe this child poses? Webb stepped forward, tablet in hand, clearly prepared for this question. Unknown viral or bacterial contamination, potential for transmitting strategic intelligence to hostile alien forces, psychological manipulation capabilities and adaptive intelligence that could compromise human security systems. Age is irrelevant when dealing with non-human intelligence, Admiral Chen interjected. We have no frame of reference for their development patterns or capabilities. Kira made another distressed sound, looking up at Queen Alara with eyes that clearly understood she was being discussed as a threat. The child's earlier peace had evaporated, replaced by the same fear that had haunted her since the crash. Senator Morrison, the Queen said carefully. What exactly are you proposing to do with her? Complete biological analysis, psychological evaluation, intelligence extraction, and determination of whether she represents a clear and present danger to human security. Morrison's tone was matter of fact, as if discussing livestock. Standard protocol for hostile alien contacts. She's not hostile. She's traumatized. Trauma can be manipulated. Her apparent emotional attachment to humans could be an evolved form of psychological warfare, making us lower our guard through false displays of vulnerability. Queen Alara felt something cold and furious building in her chest. You're suggesting that a child's grief for her dead parents is a military strategy? I'm suggesting we cannot afford assumptions when human lives are at stake. Kira suddenly stood up on the bench, placing herself between Queen Alara and the approaching officials. Her small frame trembled, but she spread all four arms wide in a gesture that was unmistakably protective. Soft musical sounds emerged from her throat. Not distress calls now, more deliberate. She's trying to protect you, Captain Torres realized with wonder. She thinks they're threatening her queen. The sight of a terrified alien child attempting to shield the most powerful human in space from her own government officials created a moment of crystalline clarity. Every person in the garden could see exactly what they were choosing between: a child's love or institutional fear. "Kira," Queen Alara said gently, standing and placing her hands on the child's shoulders. "It's all right. I'm safe." But Kira continued her protective stance, those dark eyes fixed on Morrison with surprising determination. She made the formal hand gesture again, this time directed at him, and spoke several words in her musical language with unmistakable authority. "What did she say?" Morrison demanded. Torres, who had been studying the linguistic reports, translated hesitantly. She said, she claims royal protection for her queen. She's invoking some kind of formal protocol from her own culture. Impossible. She's a child with no authority. She's a child who just declared herself your equal in defending someone she loves. Queen Alara interrupted, her voice carrying royal command now, "And I'm declaring that protection mutual." Morrison's face flushed red. "Your Majesty, you cannot seriously." "I can. And I do." Queen Alara moved to stand beside Kira, one hand resting protectively on the child's shoulder. "By royal decree, Kira is now under permanent protection of the crown. Any action against her is an action against the monarchy itself. Parliament will override. Parliament will have to explain to the people why they want to torture a child." The Queen's voice cut through Morrison's bluster like a blade. "Good luck with that political position, Senator." Admiral Chen stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable with the standoff. "Majesty, surely we can find a compromise. Perhaps supervised observation rather than full custody transfer?" Queen Alara looked at Kira, who was still trembling despite her brave protective stance. The child's trust had been shattered once by humans who saw her as a specimen rather than a person. It wouldn't happen again. "No compromise," she said firmly. "Kira stays with her family. Any research will be voluntary, supervised and conducted with her explicit consent. Any attempt to remove her against her will be considered an act of treason against the crown." Morrison's face darkened with fury. "Your Majesty, you're making a dangerous mistake. When this creature betrays humanity, and it will, the blood will be on your hands." Kira suddenly moved, stepping forward until she was directly in front of Morrison. She looked up at him with those ancient dark eyes and spoke one word clearly in human language: "No." Then she returned to Queen Alara's side and took her hand, the simple gesture carrying more weight than any political argument. Morrison stared at the child, perhaps finally seeing something beyond his own fears. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes," Queen Alara replied, "it is." As the delegation retreated, Kira collapsed onto the bench, exhaustion overtaking her small body. The effort of protecting her adopted queen had drained her completely. But as Queen Alara gathered the child into her arms, she felt Kira's racing heartbeat begin to slow. "It's over," she whispered into Kira's scaled ear. "You're safe. We're family now, and family protects each other." Kira made one soft sound, barely a whisper, but unmistakably the word home. In the garden where morning light danced through ancient trees, an alien child fell asleep in human arms for the last time as a refugee. When she woke, she would be a princess, a bridge between worlds and living proof that love could triumph over fear. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but no longer hopeless. Queen Alara held her adopted daughter close and watched the sunrise on a new chapter of galactic history. One written not in conquest or conflict, but in the quiet triumph of a child who had chosen trust over trauma, and the queen who had chosen to trust her in return.